The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty parking lot of Miller's General Store. Sarah adjusted her small pink dress and pushed a strand of curly blonde hair from her face as she watched her father, David, kneel beside their old wooden cart. The wheel had come loose again, just like it did every few weeks. The metal rim scraped against the pavement with each turn, making a grinding sound that echoed off the nearby buildings. David wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve. His gray jacket was worn thin at the elbows, and his dark hair showed streaks of early silver despite his young age. He had been trying to fix the cart for 20 minutes now, using nothing but a bent screwdriver and sheer determination. The cart held everything they owned that mattered. A few blankets, some clothes, and the wooden box where they kept the money from selling flowers on street corners. "Daddy, is it broken again?" Sarah asked, her voice soft and patient. She had learned not to sound worried, even when she felt scared inside. Worry lines would appear on her father's face when she seemed upset, and she did not want to add to his troubles. David looked up at his daughter and managed a small smile. "Just a little stubborn today, sweetheart. Nothing we can't handle." He turned the wheel slowly, listening to the grinding sound. The axle was wearing down, and he knew it would need to be replaced soon. But replacement parts cost money they did not have. The parking lot was busy with afternoon shoppers. Cars pulled in and out, their engines humming softly. People walked past carrying bags full of groceries, talking on phones, checking their watches. Most did not notice the man and little girl beside the broken cart. Those who did glance over quickly looked away, as if acknowledging their presence might somehow complicate their own day. Sarah watched the people pass by. She had grown good at reading faces. Some looked tired, like they carried heavy burdens of their own. Others seemed rushed, their minds already focused on the next place they needed to be. A few looked kind, with gentle eyes and soft expressions. Those were the ones who sometimes stopped to buy flowers, even when they probably did not need any. A woman in a business suit walked past, talking rapidly into her phone about deadlines and meetings. An elderly man shuffled by, moving slowly with the help of a walking cane. Two teenagers laughed as they headed toward the store entrance, their backpacks bouncing with each step. Then Sarah noticed someone approaching who was different from the others. A man in his 30s walked toward them with measured steps. He wore a simple button-down shirt and dark pants. His face held an expression of genuine concern, not the quick glance of pity or discomfort that Sarah had learned to recognize. The man slowed as he reached their spot beside the cart. He did not immediately speak, but instead knelt down to Sarah's eye level. His movements were careful and respectful, as if he understood that approaching strangers, especially a child, required patience and trust. "Hello there," he said to Sarah, his voice warm and steady. "I'm Michael. I noticed you and your dad having some trouble with your cart. Is there anything I can do to help?" David looked up from the wheel, instinctively moving closer to Sarah. Years of uncertainty had made him cautious around strangers, even kind ones. But something in Michael's tone and posture suggested honest intentions. "We're managing okay," David replied, though his voice carried the weight of someone who had been managing alone for a very long time. "Just a loose wheel. Happens sometimes." Michael nodded, understanding the careful balance of pride and need that often existed in difficult situations. He did not push or insist. Instead, he simply stayed kneeling beside Sarah, letting the family decide how much help they wanted to accept. Sarah studied Michael's face. His eyes were kind, with small lines at the corners that suggested he smiled often. His hands rested gently on his knees, and he waited patiently for her or her father to speak again. She had learned to trust her instincts about people, and something about this stranger felt safe. "We sell flowers," Sarah said finally, gesturing toward a small bouquet of daisies in the cart. "Daddy picks them from the field behind the old church. They're very pretty." Michael looked at the flowers, then back at Sarah. "They are beautiful. You must take very good care of them." "I help arrange them," Sarah said with a small smile. "Daddy says I have gentle hands." David's expression softened as he watched his daughter talk with Michael. She had been through so much in her short life, yet she still found ways to see goodness in the world. Her mother had died 2 years ago, and since then, it had been just the two of them, figuring out each day as it came. "The wheel keeps coming loose," David explained, finally accepting that he might need assistance. "I can usually tighten it enough to get us home, but it's getting worse each time." Michael looked at the cart more closely. The wood was weathered but sturdy, clearly built to last. The problem was indeed with the metal wheel assembly, which had worn down from years of use on rough pavement. I have some tools in my truck, Michael offered. Nothing fancy, but maybe something that would work better than that screwdriver. David hesitated for a moment, then nodded. That would be helpful. Thank you. As Michael walked toward his truck, Sarah tugged gently on her father's jacket sleeve. Daddy, she whispered, he seems nice. Yes, he does, David agreed, watching Michael's retreating figure. But remember what we talked about. We're always polite, but we stay careful too. Michael returned with a small toolbox and knelt beside the cart wheel. He worked quietly, his movements efficient but unhurried. David crouched nearby, ready to help when needed. Sarah sat on the edge of the cart, swinging her legs and watching the repair process with interest. There, Michael said after several minutes, spinning the wheel to test it. The grinding sound was gone, replaced by smooth, quiet rotation. That should hold for a while longer. Though eventually, you'll probably want to replace this whole assembly. Thank you, David said, and Sarah could hear the relief in his voice. I really appreciate your help. Michael began packing up his tools, but Sarah noticed something in his expression had changed. He looked thoughtful, almost sad, as if he were remembering something from long ago. Are you okay, mister? Sarah asked, her childlike directness cutting through any pretense. Michael paused in his packing and looked at her with surprise. Most adults would not have noticed his momentary shift in mood, but children often saw things that others missed. I was just thinking about my own daughter, Michael said softly. She would have been about your age now. The word, would, hung in the air between them, carrying weight that Sarah could feel but not fully understand. David's expression grew more gentle, recognizing the language of loss that he knew too well. Where is she now? Sarah asked, her voice small and curious. Michael was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. She got very sick a few years ago. The doctors tried everything they could, but sometimes even their best efforts aren't enough. Sarah slipped down from the cart and walked over to Michael. Without saying anything, she wrapped her small arms around his shoulders in a gentle hug. The gesture was spontaneous and pure, coming from a place of instinctive kindness that had not yet been complicated by adult awkwardness or social conventions. Michael's eyes filled with tears as he returned the hug. David watched the scene unfold, understanding that sometimes the most meaningful exchanges happened without words. We don't need food today, Sarah whispered into Michael's ear, her voice barely audible. Just a hug. The simple statement carried profound wisdom. In that moment, she had recognized that Michael's need was not for anything material, but for human connection and the reminder that kindness still existed in the world. Michael held the hug for several seconds, drawing comfort from the pure compassion of a child who had faced her own hardships but had not let them harden her heart. When they finally separated, he wiped his eyes and smiled at Sarah with genuine gratitude. Thank you, he said. That was exactly what I needed. David placed a gentle hand on his daughter's shoulder, proud of her intuitive kindness. She has a gift for knowing what people need, he said to Michael. Michael stood and finished packing his tools. As he prepared to leave, he reached into his wallet and pulled out a $20 bill. For the flowers, he said, holding out the money. David started to protest that it was too much, but Michael shook his head. Consider it payment for the hug, he said with a smile. That was worth far more than $20. Sarah selected the prettiest bouquet from their cart and handed it to Michael with a small curtsy. These are for your daughter, she said. Wherever she is now, I think she would like them. Michael accepted the flowers with reverence, holding them carefully against his chest. I think she would too. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you both. As Michael walked back to his truck, David and Sarah began preparing to head home with their newly repaired cart. The wheel turned smoothly and quietly, making their journey easier. Daddy, Sarah said as they started walking, do you think we helped him feel better? David looked back at Michael, who was placing the flowers carefully on his passenger seat. I think we did, sweetheart. Sometimes the best way to help someone is just to remind them that they're not alone in the world. Sarah nodded, satisfied with this explanation. As they walked home in the golden light of late afternoon, the cart rolling smoothly behind them, she felt the quiet satisfaction that comes from knowing you have made someone's day a little brighter. The encounter had lasted only 30 minutes, but it had created connections that would resonate far longer. Michael would remember Sarah's spontaneous hug during difficult moments in the days ahead. David would remember that accepting help from strangers did not diminish his dignity. And Sarah would carry forward the understanding that sometimes the most powerful gift you can offer someone is simply your presence and compassion. In a world that often seemed too busy for genuine human connection, three strangers had found a moment of authentic caring. The broken cart had brought them together, but it was their willingness to see past their own circumstances and truly notice each other that had created something beautiful and lasting.